Let's dive in. Today is April 13th, Tuesday at 5:02 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting of the Provo Municipal Council work session to order. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means on March 25th, 2021, in accordance with Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act. I determined that conducting meetings of the Municipal Council with an anchor location, such as the Municipal Council Chamber, represents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I've made this determination. The World Health Organization has classified novel coronavirus disease, aka COVID-19, as a pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. Utah County is currently listed as having a moderate level of coronavirus transmission, as determined by the state's transmission index metrics. Health guidance levels issued by Utah Department of Health limits gathering sizes, requires masks to be worn in public settings, and strongly recommends physical distancing. Additionally, the chair of the governing board of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City, Shannon Ellsworth, has determined that its meetings are subject to the same risks and has adopted the same procedures as the municipal council. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com/Provo City Council. The meeting's being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. And let's see, as far as counselors present, I see we have, looks like at the moment that we're only missing Counselor Fillmore, I believe. And we have members of council staff, our city CIO, Wayne Parker, and others from the administration here with us as well. Today, the opening prayer will be provided by Counselor Travis Hoban.
Our Father in heaven, grateful for this opportunity to come together, serve the people of Provo. We're grateful for the great city we live in, for the wonderful residents and the opportunity we have to live here and work here and serve here. We ask you to please bless our time tonight, that we'll be guided to ask good questions and make good decisions, and that we'll have good feelings amongst the council and be able to be very productive. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please use the raise hand function to indicate that you'd like to speak, and please wait to speak until called upon by the council chair. We'll now begin our first and only item of business for tonight, which is a discussion regarding the council's budget priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. And this will be initially be presented by Cliff Strachan, our executive director.
Thank you, Chair Sewell. You should be able to see now a PowerPoint in which I'm going to walk you through kind of the history of the council priorities and help frame some of the discussion. I will say that one of the challenges you've got is this: you could make this a 4-hour discussion, as Bill Fillmore pointed out to me earlier today, but you're going to try and do in an hour. So to the extent that you can stay at the 30,000 foot level and not at the 10,000 or ground levels, you'll be able to get through it. So today's discussion is about setting council priorities and how they can be expressed through the budget document. Obviously, you get to express your policy preferences, and really the question you've got is where can additional funds be spent to achieve your policies? Back at the beginning of this council's term in March, just before we had the COVID put everybody online, council met in a work session at the Energy Building, and in broad summaries, these were the priorities that you came up with: the general plan, inclusive outreach, and enhance your gateways, research park, housing sustainability, zoning compliance, and natural amenities. Those are, again, broad strokes of what you talked about. And still, some of these continue to be your priorities as you go through. Late last year, we wanted to see where we were and what we wanted to get done. And I asked you all the question, what would you like to accomplish in the next 12 months? And then I summarized your answers. A lot more detail in the memo I sent you in November. But again, general plan, governance, some specific projects with respect to sign and parking, economic development, public safety, zoning, sustainability, conservation, and preservation continue to be priorities for you. When you heard the budget presentations over the winter from the departments, what you heard is some common themes. You heard about restoration of budget reductions being a priority, filling staffing vacancies, identified staffing additions to fill needs in different departments. There was talk of needs, there was talk of technology, there was a desire to put back training and travel funding so that we can keep up on our skills. There were operational issues, projects, and programs that the departments raised with you. So getting a little bit, down a little bit, maybe 30 to 20, but the restoration of budget reductions. There were things like Parks and Recreation wanting to get back to normal operations after dealing with COVID. The training budgets talked about filling vacant positions. But there are staffing additions that are needed or requested in terms of parking and sustainability coordinators is something the council is interested in. I believe there are 9 police officers that are being asked for. Parks and Recreation would like a sports coordinator. Covey Center wants to have a marketing employee. Facilities, Justice Court, Information Systems all have staffing needs that they've identified with some specificity or even generally. The airport, there's going to be need eventually for fire people and operations people there. These are all things that were raised. And under more generalized equipment, there are needs for uniforms in code enforcement. Recreational and parks equipment are always needed. Police and fire identified a number of equipment needs. Fleet always has needs. Capital equipment is an important thing to stay funded with. Technology, community service, customer service wants to do self-service kiosks. Information service systems have some asks. Fire wanted to do some wellness programs and fund some paramedic school for some paramedics. Under operations, there's issues in information systems, the 911 center, airport, it's a floodplain project. So there's lots of needs throughout the city. One last area under projects and programs, you can see what they've got there. You've heard all about the regional sports park, aquifer storage, water treatment. There's a general plan that's ongoing. Parks and Recs wants to do something with the triple play. Mental wellness and risk reduction are all issues that have come forward and been presented to you. And so now you've got to decide, kind of what is important to you. The mayor's going to make her recommendations with or without you. And much of the challenge that you've got is you only have so much money that's going to be ongoing after restoration of funds that were cut. And those are going to be issues. You're also going to have an issue around trying to figure out with all the asks what can be funded out of the one-time monies. So it's helpful to help identify for the mayor ahead of her budget recommendations, what your thoughts are. And then you'll still have the option when you get the budget in May to figure out whether it was sufficient or whether you want to make changes. But these are some of the things that that council has identified in an email that you shared the last 2 days. There's a desire to restore staffing. There's a recognition that additional staffing is needed. To the extent how much and how far you want to go with that is up for discussion. You want to resume training budgets. You recognize that under operations and administration, there's these requests. Most of those are from the fire. But then you're going to have one-time uses. One of the questions is what to do with some of the money left in the legacy CIP fund. What are your priorities for that? This is a list of one-time projects and funding ideas that you have. I'll just let you read them on the screen, but there's quite a few of them, and then coming up in the foreseeable future is this American Rescue Plan and the funding that's going to come in 2 tranches to the city, some in May of this year, some in May of next year, and how that money's to be spent, and you're going to have an opportunity to weigh in on that at some point. And one of the questions is the timing on that. Can this part of the discussion, can it wait till next year and do a separate appropriation once we actually know what the Treasury Department is allowing and what money's actually come into the city? So the final thing on here is just kind of what's next in terms of timing. The effort today was to kind of identify, at a very high level, what is important to you, and then hopefully on April 20th, if you don't get it done today, by April 20th, hopefully narrow it down to a point you can actually advise the mayor what you think is important. In any case, you get the budget on May 4th, and we have until the end of June, but our last scheduled meeting so far is June 15th. So that's kind of the timing you have left on the budget. Are there any questions? Okay, so forgive me for going very fast on that. I'm going to turn the time back over to you, Dave Sewell, and lead the discussion however you want.
All right, thank you, Cliff. I thought that was a really good overview. Before we dive headlong into this discussion, I just have a quick question for the administration, either Wayne or the mayor, whoever you'd like to. And let me sort of frame it. So we've been categorizing the financial priorities in kind of three different categories. There's ongoing budget priorities, which are ongoing expenses. There's one-time use money that is in the legacy CIP, that 1.9 million. And that's, at this point, is now pretty much just general fund money. And then we've got this ARP money in a pretty large amount, but maybe not full clarity on exactly what the allowed uses will be yet. So my question to you, Wayne or the mayor, is which of these three, or how would you prioritize these, and what's most important for us to get to you by April 20th to help you in your budget process? That makes sense.
So both of us can speak to that. We've been working on the budget for endless hours already, trying to figure it out. And I'll just tell you where I'm at as far as this goes. Like Cliff stated, we really want to get the employees back to where they were pre-pandemic and get the departments back to where they were pre-COVID cuts. That's our number one goal. And then, and like he also stated, that takes a chunk of the money. But I feel like we owe it to the employees. They sacrificed for us, and so we need to make it right now. I don't want to postpone that if at all possible. Wayne, do you want to add?
Sure. I think you've characterized it correctly, Chair Sewell, that first, in terms of the American Rescue Plan money, we have an indication from the National League of Cities, and Cliff referenced this in his presentation, that the amount that would come under the formula in the ARP Act is it would suggest that Provo would get something north of $30 million, again, split over 2 calendar years. And so the bill calls for the first allocation to come in May of this year and a second allocation to come in May of the following year. And all the funds have to be expended by the end of calendar year 2024 or returned to the U.S. Treasury. The challenge also, as has been pointed out, is we have very little guidance yet in terms of how those funds can be used. In fact, we were in a discussion earlier today with the county, and they're confronting the same issues we are. And in fact, quite a number of counties across the country are considering suing the federal government over how this process has played out. And clearly litigation could potentially delay things even further. So at this point, we're not really counting on any American Recovery Plan money, with the exception that we do know that one of the key roles of the ARP is to provide coverage for lost revenues associated with the city. And we've done some estimating, and we are anticipating that we will use some of that money in the upcoming budget year on a very surgical basis to replace some lost revenue. But other than that, we're kind of holding back any judgment on the ARP money until we know more. In terms of the legacy CIP, again, that remaining $1.9 million that has not yet been allocated by the council, we don't have any particularly strong feelings about how or when those dollars are used. Because they are general fund money, there is no timing requirement to be met there. And so again, as we've communicated earlier, we're anxious to try to help the council to the extent that we can be helpful in figuring out ways to solicit ideas and prioritize those and so on. But the administration's key priorities were shared with you back in January, and you've already appropriated money to accomplish those. So again, as the mayor's indicated, the most important thing for us right now is to get the fiscal year 2022 budget in your hands, which we will do come heck or high water on May 4th. But to the extent that you can share key priorities with us, for example, if you generally agree with the mayor's concept of putting the organization and the employees back to where they were pre-pandemic is a priority, that would be good to know. If there are given areas, as Cliff went through his presentation, if there are things that strongly resonate with you that you feel should be very high priorities moving forward, we'd like to know those. Again, as Cliff's also suggested, a 30,000 foot level for today or for next Tuesday would be helpful, as opposed to saying, we think you ought to do 3 police officers and 2 code enforcement officers, to be a little more general than that and say, we'd like to see the mayor's budget support additional resources in, specific areas potentially. And so again, to the extent that that's the outcome of today and or next Tuesday, I think we're happy and we'll respond to that and we'll take that into final consideration as we make the last budget decisions remaining. So hope that's helpful in at least responding to your request.
Yes, thank you. And if I may, I see a few counselors ready to comment. 3. I just want to make one suggestion before we start opening the floor here. Is it seems to me that our time would best be spent focusing on the ongoing budget priorities, since we don't have the same deadline for the other 2. So with that suggestion, I'll turn to Councilor Shipley.
Thank you, Chair Sewell. And that was the reason that I raised my hand so quick, is just to suggest that we focus on the ongoing piece first. If we have time and can get through everybody and everybody has a chance to voice opinion about ongoing priorities, I wouldn't mind a discussion about either of the other 2, but I think the initial feedback should be the first priority for tonight. So really quick, from my standpoint, I'll just voice that I am supportive of the mayor trying to restore benefits and positions and training and cuts that were made in light of COVID. I think that is our first priority to restore, first of all. And it has to do with sustainability to me. I think if we create an atmosphere or culture where we're always trying to recruit and train new employees because we don't treat our employees fairly or really put them as a high priority, then I think it'll end up costing the city a lot more in lack of productivity and actual costs associated with having to hire and recruit additional people. So I'd prefer that we just take very good care of the people that we have that are doing a good job. And I think that restoration of benefits is obviously a huge part of that. In my discussions with John and in discussions with leadership, it sounds like that's going to eat up a significant part of what's available for the ongoing budget. And so I wanted to just put that out there. I think we can go through a lot of other priorities, and I think they're all important, but I do think that we may be only talking about very few dollars beyond that restoration of benefits and making sure employee compensation is competitive going forward. I think once those adjustments are made, I think there might be very few dollars to really analyze. But having said that, I think there are important things that I feel strongly about and want to communicate as well. So I think the restoration is key. I think that's part of our sustainability long term. I'd like to see us take good care of the people that we have that are doing a good job. A couple other priorities that I'll just mention and then turn time back to everybody else. I feel very strongly that we should do, this is going to sound strange, but whatever it takes to support the IT department or IS department, whatever we're going to refer to them at, information, systems or security or technology, in their goal to make sure that we're secure from a cybersecurity standpoint. So I think there was a request from our IS department for additional resources, if I'm not mistaken, either a person, an additional personnel, or, some support with a program that they already have in order to accomplish that. I think it's insurance. It's not something that's exciting to talk about, but I do think that we could get caught in a situation paying a lot more money later if we don't feel like we're really doing a great job in that particular area. So I would support, supporting the IT department in their goal of cybersecurity and doing what we need to near term with resources. The other thing, and I think this will be something we'll hear from other counselors, and they're more eloquent than I am, but I'll point out that I think that we need to begin a longer term plan for supporting the police force in hires over time. And what I mean by this is I just think that it is, whether or not we have budget this year to, take on 5 or 7 or 9, additional officers or not, I don't think is the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that our population grows every year. And so I think we should anticipate or budget for, some sort of increase in their force. I think that's just should be assumed in a growing city that you're going to need additional people as the city grows. And so I would like to see if we're not going to allocate budget this year for additional officers, I'd like to see some sort of strategic plan to account for the fact that we just need to increase our officer count on an ongoing basis based on our population growth. So something sustainable for the police force to know going forward that we support their growth and understand that a growing population requires additional police. And then the final thing that I'll mention, and maybe this is the most important to me personally, but a goal that I would have, or priority that I would have for the city on an ongoing basis, is to prioritize the overall financial health of the city. And I say that, I mean, obviously that's a priority for all of us to make sure that the city's financially strong. But if adding to the general fund is an afterthought and we only use excess reserves, for example, or excess revenue each year to fund additions to the general reserve, or the general fund, I think we're doing ourselves and the city a disservice. I think it should be a budgeted part of our balanced budget each year to add to our general fund reserves and to try to grow that general fund. I know there's limitations to it, but we're well below that. We've also drawn it down this last year based on some one-off things. And so I think as part of the budget each year, we should be, even if it's small to start, we should be trying to, as part of that balanced budget, add to the general fund each year in a proactive way, as opposed to responsive, way to a default way to, if there's money left over, that's where it goes. I'd rather have it be planned in and mapped into our actual budget. And along with that, some thought, and I really appreciated the debt breakdown that we got from the finance department, but some thought each year as part of the budget to considering, debt reduction along with general fund additions as part of our balanced budget each year, and not just waiting for excesses to look at both of those as an afterthought. So anyway, that's my point on the general overall health, financial health of the city. I think there's so many competing goals and interests associated with, these budgets each year. I don't think anybody here would be excited to have to look at all these competing interests and try to prioritize them, because they're all important. But those are some of my thoughts and things that I thought of as I was looking at our priorities for the upcoming year.
Thank you, Councillor Shipley. I just want to mention one other thing. I think it'll be really important to hear from everyone on this. Budget's one of our top priorities, so I'd like to be fairly strict on rotating through, letting all councillors have a chance to speak before we come back for a second round, and we may end up doing a third round tonight. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So next in line would be Councillor Hanley.
I think actually Councillor Harding had his hand up before me.
Oh, does this list not show them in order? I'm just looking at the participant list.
I think it does, Chair. I lowered my hand for just a moment and then re-raised it. So I think the list is right, and I'm happy to go whenever.
Okay, well, go ahead, Councillor Harding. I think you've been volunteered, so.
All right. I was planning just to make a quick comment, but if you would prefer, Chair, I can also just kind of go through the things I've been thinking about. But I first raised my hand before Mr. Parker really made clear that he feels like we should focus on what goes into the budget because that's what has the highest deadline. So I fully agree with that. I did want to mention I liked how you broke down the kind of the three groups of, or the three categories of money that we're considering right now. But we talked about the first as being ongoing budget items. And I think what goes in our budget really could be made up of both ongoing and one-time. So one-time doesn't have to be in one of these other buckets. We actually have some one-time in the current budget, and we may purchase programs or equipment with that one-time money, but that one-time money then becomes available again next year rather than being committed for future years. So I wanted to make that clarification that we can fund some one-time projects with our budget now, but because we have these two other buckets that may or may not be there, it does seem like it might make sense to hold off on, or we might want to, where that balance between one-time and ongoing, we might focus a little more on the ongoing because we may have some other resources for the one-time. So, and then another, as we talk about kind of this balancing of priorities, and we went through the very long list of kind of general requests. They're not really supplemental requests yet. We haven't kind of got to that formal step yet. But and how do we balance these different different needs? And because we can't fund all of them, but I do think we should be cognizant about how those are funded as well. Let me explain what I mean by that. There's a long list of even potential personnel we could add. And one I noticed there was a sports coordinator. And when we had our Parks and Rec presentation before, I asked about, we see there what the cost was for adult sports programs through Parks and Rec. And then, in another place, we see all the fees that are collected, but we didn't see a breakdown of the fees collected and how that, how much of that came from adult sports. and I believe everyone received it afterwards, some information that basically shows that the adult sports program, the fees that are collected, pays for all of the direct costs plus some overhead for that program being run. And so when I look at that and see that it's paying for its costs, then to me, adding a sports coordinator, if adding a sports coordinator will help grow the program, will have a better experience for people, maybe more sports, more teams or whatever, and so that sports coordinator ends up being covered by the either immediately or in the coming years, that position is going to be covered by the fees that for the services that coordinator is providing. To me, that's not the same as like adding a police officer, which is funded from our taxes. And so as we go through that, I don't think that the comparison should be quite one-to-one for, again, positions that are paid for by the services that they will be supporting. And then as far as like priorities that I'd like the administration to focus on as they prepare this budget, in addition to like all of the things we've been talking about, and I don't want to this isn't a higher priority to me than restoring the budgets, and I'm not sure exactly how it fits in with some of the other requests. But one thing that I didn't see us necessarily highlight was the work that Community and Neighborhood Services, that department, is doing. And I apologize, let me transition really quick here. The Carryover Committee, and I think you hopefully everyone had a chance to read through the last meeting notes. But I think in discussing with the administration, the best way for the council and the administration to interact on finances, on oversight, on setting priorities and whatnot. Really, the best way to do that is basically what we're doing now, setting priorities, and then also, specifying what kind of outcomes we would like to see, and at some point in the process, even in talking about like metrics of how we would like to see those outcomes measured, so we can see the impact that we're having by how we prioritize the money we spend through the budget. And so I think the council can do a better job at doing that, and I hope we all keep that in mind as we have these both priority discussions, and then later as we talk about the budget, is as we make these investments, what kind of metrics and what kind of accountability will we be looking for. And so with that in mind, with Community and Neighborhood Services, I definitely don't want to say, well, hey, we want X number of people in these position, or in that, how many in that position, but just broadly, and I sent this to everyone in an email, but looking at the summary that Cliff put together of the 2021 priorities after he interviewed each of us, asking, what would you like to see accomplished this year? I would say 75%. Oh, looks like, yeah, there we go. So everything that's highlighted is my estimation, my analysis of what things are either primarily or secondarily handled by Community and Neighborhood Services. And that's 75% of what we would want to get accomplished really kind of goes through CNS. And there's a few things that aren't on here, but they've been almost decades long, things that have been something that they've talked about wanting to do, or that the various councils over all of those years have said that they would like to see done, including, I'll say the neighborhood or area plans. We've worked a lot on West Provo development policies. That eventually became a future land use map, which is one component of an area plan, but has that area plan, that text that supports that map has not been completed. And sometimes we hear from constituents, from residents of Provo, that feel like, well, that the city is ignoring my part of the city. And I think having these area plans, these neighborhood plans, can really help every part of the city kind of go through that process of, what do we want, what kind of where are we headed, and I really think that this could be a way to really kind of get everyone on the same playing field, because right now we have a handful that have been completed, but probably 3/4 of them have not been completed, or maybe it's just 2/3 now. But anyway, the point is between that and all of these other things that we would like to see get done, a lot of it depends on CNS, and I guess I would like to see more come at, be accomplished there. And so and I would just like to ask the administration to look into how can we speed that up? How can we get the high quality that they're producing, but how do we get more throughput, more bandwidth there? And I would like to, because I believe it touches on so many of the priorities that we're trying to accomplish, and I think a lot is being held back because of just their capacity right now. And so that's where I'd like the administration to look into that, and how can we increase the capacity of our community and neighborhood services department.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harding. We'll move on to Councillor Handley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would fully support reinstituting all of the losses pre-COVID or during COVID to get us back to, at least pre-COVID status. I think not doing so is unconscionable. So I think I certainly support the administration's top priority in that regard. And I think a lot of what's already been said about finding creative ways, obviously to do things as cost effectively as possible, I think is always behooves us. And I think in general, I think we do find those ways to do that. And on that point, I would say that I saw the sustainability plan was mentioned. I'm happy to report that Don Jarvis and Travis Ball and Kevin Garlick have been in conversation about the possibility of using money that either comes from the sale of RECs through UMPA and or its energy efficiency plan that it's offering to cities could actually more than cover for the cost of a sustainability plan. So I actually don't think, and assuming that Robert continues with that work, I think there's actually a way to get a sustainability plan that doesn't affect our budget. So I think that's something to be thinking about. I just wanted to make sure, and that's just an example of sort of, taking care of something more creatively that doesn't end up costing. As far as the police go, I think I share what's already been said about that, the need for officers to be able to do more preventative work, which they're currently not able to do because of their numbers. And I think we've long recognized that they were understaffed and continue to be. I don't know whether 9 makes sense right away, but I do think that, and maybe given the possibility of some of the, once we get clearer guidance about the ARP money and how we could spend it and in what ways we could creatively use it for benefits to the city, it may make some sense to do that in a, sort of a 2-year plan or a 2 to 3 year plan to get us out of the situation we're in into a better situation. But I certainly feel that that's a strong priority. And my last 2 comments are just more maybe pointing a little bit toward the future, but the 1.9 million, I still feel very strongly that that money could be really well used for projects related to Slate Canyon. And some of the energy we've seen around that is really exciting and inspiring. And I think there's some opportunities and needs there. And related to that, the larger question of conservation, which is, of course, an important priority that we all talked about previously and is still there on our list of priorities. I just want us to be thinking ahead in terms of ways of shoring up some monies to be able to act proactively in conservation rather than just reactively. Sometimes I think we end up sort of being in a pinch, cornered by a variety of different forces and choices that are out there that make us not able to be proactively envisioning and implementing a plan for future generations to be able to continue to enjoy our outdoors in important ways. And that isn't just, I think that applies to the possibility of conservation easements. I think it applies to, our continued efforts with the Provo River and the river restoration project and related questions with regard to the river and the lake, but also the foothills and the canyons. That's a lot. That's just a big priority that I hope we can keep some focus on as we think about using those funds going forward. That's all I wanted to share at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Ellsworth, are you still under that constraint of needing to leave around 6 o'clock? If so, I was going to suggest that you go next in case we have time for a second round so that you'd be able to participate in that as well.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Shipley on investing in our employees and hopefully reducing costs long-term by investing in our employees. And additionally, it's hard for me to prioritize these in my mind immediately, but in the short term, I absolutely support us investing in our employees. And that includes fire and police. Maybe my second priority or kind of a companion priority to that would be, I never ever want to get behind on infrastructure. I just think it's absolutely critical that we have the best possible mechanisms to fund specifically roads and sidewalks. Every square foot of asphalt that we have is a liability. And so anything that we can do in the immediate budget season to make sure that our infrastructure is in the best possible position, we will be handing down a gift and less of a liability to the next council and to the next generation. So those are kind of my top two priorities. George spoke about Slate Canyon and the 1.8 million that we could still allocate from last year's legacy fund. And I think that's a top priority. Citizens in this area and across the whole county would benefit from us investing in the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and in the Slate Canyon area and in the park there. Our other two canyons have just been phenomenal jewels, and this is a diamond in the rough. So it's a top priority for me. And that's where my immediate priorities are. As for some of the longer term, or I shouldn't say longer term, but these bigger funding allocations that are coming from the federal government, I'd be interested in getting more information and answering those questions in another meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Fillmore, we welcome. He came very early on in the meeting. Or Councillor Hoban, who would like to go next?
I'll go ahead. That's fine.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the assistance from Cliff and his staff in getting these priority documents to us. It's helpful. My number one priority is, I would simply echo what's been said. We simply got to restore our city employees to market wage status. I think one could argue it's bad faith on our part not to, for the sacrifices that they've experienced. And so I'd like to thank them for those sacrifices and show them that we value them and want to invest in them, as Shannon has indicated. My second priority, and somewhat related to that, is not just market wages, but giving our police officers and our fire department the support they need. We may not be able to do it all at once, but I think nothing's more important than public safety in terms of our priorities as a council. So that would be my second, is police and fire. Third would be to get into the CNS arena. I think we all feel that there's just a crying need to beef up our zoning enforcement. Just have to do that. We've got to give Gary some warm bodies to pull that off effectively, and that spills over into parking enforcement. They seem to be related. With respect to one-time use money, the 1.9 million that's available, my number one priority is Southeast Provo. That merges into a variety of things. One is Slate Canyon Park. Another is the property acquisition that includes Bonneville Trail. I just think that area's been overlooked. But part of that is I think we need to, we've got essentially $1 million incentive fund in West Provo on West State, West Center, or in that vicinity. And I think we have to consider some kind of incentive to get a grocery store on South State Street. I think this is a crying need, and particularly on the old drive-in property. And we just ought to reserve some money to allow the mayor to do whatever can be done to incentivize that. And I'm aware of some discussions that are going on, and want to encourage that every way we can.
Here, here.
My third priority for that 1.9 would be this strategic property acquisition. We're a little bit specific on that. I would have thought that was more of a closed meeting thing, but there's a huge opportunity at South University that we need to take advantage of to put as an economic development proposition, as well as affordable housing proposition, to do something really good with that particular block. And it's going to require some effort on our part. And I'd like to reserve some money for that. And maybe that merges into the third section, the ARP money. But that's a high priority for me. I've got lots of ideas for the ARP money, but I'll pass on those for now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Councillor Hoban.
All right. My 4 priorities are my 4 Ps. Pay and benefits to pre-COVID levels, number 1. Number 2, public health and safety. Number 3, planning and infrastructure. And number 4, prosperity, which to me means economic development. But I had to find a P for it. So I pay and benefits to pre-COVID levels. Of course, there are a lot of people in Provo who have been hit hard. I think we cannot impact them all, but we can impact some. And I think looking at the employees of Provo, it's like greasing the wheels for how our city functions. We have to take care of those important cogs in the wheel, so to speak. Sometimes we feel like cogs in the wheel, but making sure that those employees are taken care of and happy and content in their jobs and doing a good job for us. Public health and safety. I'd like to challenge the city to come back with some recommendations on what they think that means, whether that means additional police or fire personnel or training or whatever that might be, equipment. I'm not sure, but public health and safety to me is a big priority, probably top priority and purpose of us as a city, right? Planning and infrastructure, I really echo Councillor Ellsworth's priority there as far as wanting to make sure that we're planning for the future. And then prosperity, economic development. High tides lift all boats. And so I'd like to see us focus on the future there. And again, I don't know, I could definitely make some recommendations, but I'd probably be wrong in as far as how those are executed and exactly what projects should fall into those 4 Ps for me. But those are my four priorities, my 4 Ps. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, I really appreciate the great comments that we've had so far here and suggestions. I'll add my take on it. I agree with what many have said, that the first priority should be restoring market wages and benefits. We need to take care of the key people in our city who have the experience and knowledge to run things. I would actually separate that from restoring all positions. I see those as two separate things. And I'll give just a couple of examples of, I think, of positions that I think are very high priority for me. Zoning and parking enforcement. I've just, in my entire 7 years here, I see complaints about those all the time, and I think they really affect quality of life issues. So I would put an even higher priority on restoring those to full strength. I guess that's the 30,000 foot view. Back to full strength on those. Public safety, I would also rate very high, and I'd like to suggest a nuance in what it might mean to restore them to full strength. I think in a lot of our departments where we just have a few people, restoring to full strength means going back to the staffing levels that we had. I'm not sure that same approach is applicable to public safety, because our population is growing, our police officers are getting more calls, I would assume, and increasing workload. So as I look at that, to me, restoring them to full strength means getting their call level and workload back to what it was 2 years ago. Because if they continue to be more and more overworked, I think that has safety implications for them and for our residents, and retention implications as well. So my suggestion would be to look at what is the level of police officers that we would need to have to be where we were 2 years ago, if you take population and call volume growth into account. So I don't know what that is. Maybe it's one more officer, or maybe it's two, I don't know. But that would be my idea of restoring public safety to full strength. As far as other departments, it would be great if we could restore every position. I just don't know, the details of the budget enough to know if that's possible. Maybe there are a few places that have to wait a little bit longer. I don't know. We'll see what the mayor's team comes up with when they present us their budget. Those are my, well, let me just check my list real quick here. Yeah, I think the other thoughts I have can wait on the one-time use money for the legacy CIP. Okay, so we're 5 minutes away from where we had hoped to be finished. This is a difficult task. I'm wondering, can we give everybody 1 minute to kind of, any additional thoughts you might have, any follow-up comments and that, and see where that leaves us after we do that? Councillor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I just appreciate your kind of prioritization of staffing needs. I think that I would agree with that. I really appreciate Councillor Fillmore's emphasis on economic development and one of the P's of Mr. Hoban on economic development and prosperity. I completely agree with that. And just general reinvestment in Southeast Provo and making sure that our priorities are aligned equitably so that each neighborhood is safe and attractive.
Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Thanks. I really appreciate what you said about staffing levels, and I think often we talk about what are we going to add to the budget, what are we going to add to the budget, and over the years I think we've added a lot to the budget, and particularly when we come up to some really pressing needs, perhaps public safety, planning, some of these needs, I think it may make sense to go back and, instead of just restoring everything to where they were at past levels, actually have them compete against these other priorities. And maybe there is a program, or maybe there is a service that is good but is not as good as these other, and perhaps now is a good time to not restore or actually retire some of these programs or services. So I would recommend or ask the administration to take a look at that as they're putting together the budget. And between the two, what do I say? I'll say this one. I think as far as infrastructure, I think for the past 6-7 years, 8 years, longer than I've been on the council, there's been a plan to get us back to where we are not in a hole, because 8, 9, 10 years ago, we were in a very big hole as far as infrastructure is concerned. And I think we have a good plan. We've been executing that plan. And I think we are getting to the point where we probably should be, as long as we continue to fund, we should be sustainable. For roads, that really was the UTF. And I think at this point, our roads themselves, we're not getting into a bigger hole. And we've had some great presentations over the years on how Public Works stays on top of the roads and make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck by maintaining rather than redoing later on. So maybe it would be a good time for them to repeat that presentation. But if we want, aside from maintaining our roads that we build, if we want to raise the level of service or raise our standards as far as street safety and sidewalks and whatnot, I think that would be a good conversation to have, because I think that's where, we should, if that's where we want to go, we should raise that, and then set that higher standard, and then allow Public Works to go around and decide where's the places that are most important for us to, where's the biggest gap between where things are at now and where they should be.
Thank you, Councilor Hardy. Councilor Fillmore, you're muted.
Thank you, Chair. I don't need to reiterate the priorities I articulated earlier. What I would like to do is use the 60 seconds you gave me simply to whet the council's appetite on a couple things. This pertains more to ARP funds. Just to report, your Economic Development Committee has been quite active in terms of pursuing various initiatives. And we have some really exciting things to share with the full council when the time is appropriate, pertaining to a Provo Technology Center, inland port satellite potential, and improving our gateways and some downtown development. And we really do look forward to having a longer discussion on those items that augur well for long-term financial viability for the city.
Sounds good. Thank you. Councilor Shipley, did you want a second bite for a minute?
No, I don't think I need one, so I'll defer.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hoban?
No, I do not either. Thank you.
Councilor Hanley?
I'm good.
Okay, I think I'm good too. So let me just ask this question as we consider next steps. And I don't know if you want to kind of give me a thumbs up sign or whatever, or thumbs down. Do you feel like, and I'll need to ask the administration this too, do you feel like we've communicated enough on our budget priorities to the mayor going into this first go round, or to the extent that we could move on to talking about legacy CIP next, or would you like to have another discussion about budget priorities on April 20th? Councilor Harding? You're muted.
Thank you. I could use my thumb, but what I noticed that Cliff Strachan is putting together kind of a spreadsheet of these ideas that we're voicing. I'm guessing that perhaps the plan was to send that out to the counselors and kind of see where there's consensus. And if that's the case, I think that would be helpful to do between now and our next meeting. That way, we can have maybe more of a document of, specified exactly what, rather than just kind of this broader conversation.
I was making that spreadsheet and I can share it if you would like to see. I was just kind of updating it as I was taking the minutes.
Okay, and I know Cliff would like to say a few words, but I also want to make sure that we hear from the administration is if they want more or if what we're doing now is sufficient.
Yeah, what I was going to recommend was suggest Elizabeth put this up to save time and just have you each quickly go through and tell us which of these you want to see in there, and maybe the next step on this for a follow-up is if you had to rank these, what would fall into your how would you group these? What would you consider to be what's the term you guys use, Wayne? Critical, necessary, and aspirational. But what we thought was, if you're interested, we could have you go through and just see if there's support for all this, or we could do it offline, and then come back with it, because we could probably, what's the word? Clean this up a little bit and then go that route. And that would be probably helpful. And then if it's ready for next week, you could look at it and just simply say, yes, this is our priorities. We pass it on to the administration, let them figure out how to make it work.
Yeah,
I think. Offline?
Let's see, who was that?
Sorry, that was me. I was just wondering if we could do this kind of in survey format.
Yeah, likely.
That's a possibility. Councillor Handley?
Yeah, I would prefer that. I mean, I didn't say much about some of the other ideas, and I would be happy to give some input on that, but I don't think it would be a good use of time to do it kind of on the fly with each of us here. I think if we just looked at the document and you could ask us about priorities. I just wanted to clarify one thing, and I actually don't think it needs to go onto the spreadsheet, but I was talking about conservation and not just sustainability, conservation of open land as a longer term priority for ARP monies. I just want us to be thinking about that, but I was planting that seed. I wasn't addressing our current budget issues other than the legacy CIP for Slate Canyon.
Yeah. And maybe we'll need to talk about this in leadership. I kind of feel like some of these things on here are kind of apples and oranges. It's going to be a little hard to sort of do a ranked choice voting on these the way they're up here right now. So
and what I was doing was, as I kind of heard repeated themes, I was trying to kind of categorize it at a super high level. I added some notes on a few of these with kind of more specific comments, but since we were trying to keep it really high level, this was just kind of how I was kind of tabulating just things that I was hearing. So there are definitely other ways of looking at it or explaining these, and some of them that are really closely related. But
yeah. Okay, well, we'll definitely have a good discussion about this in leadership, and we'll send something out to you to get more information. Try to a little more fine-grained, but I'd like to hear from the administration again, kind of where you think we're at. Do you get a sense from the general discussion that you have enough of a sense of what our priorities, or do you want us to come up with some kind of a ranking on these?
I'll say I feel good that 7 of you have put restoring the city back to pre-COVID as the #1 priority. So that's where I'm starting with the budget. So far I'm fine with the discussion and where you're landing, and Cliff's really good, and Elizabeth, to organize it and email it out. So that'll be helpful. The biggest, just a heads up, it's going to be a tight budget once we restore the city. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It's going to be a tight budget.
Okay. Anything you wanted to add, Wayne?
No, I think that's good. Obviously we have to get a lot more finer grain on this before we bring it back to you. So I think it's good to know kind of where you're headed. We'll spend some time thinking about this as well between now and next Tuesday, and look forward. If you want to get a little more finely grained, I think that's fine. But we'll try to hit your highest themes and bring you a budget you can get your arms around, be excited about. So,
okay, sounds good. All right, counselors. So are you satisfied if we end the meeting for tonight then and get back to you via email after leadership has had a discussion about how to get further, more fine grained input from you?
You bet. Sounds good.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any objection then. So we will conclude the meeting, adjourn the meeting by unanimous consent. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.